This cabinet scandal led to threats of lawsuits, investigations, and the scapegoating of Admiral Mark Norman, who was suspended by Minister Sajjan and General Vance. En 2015, quelques semaines après avoir été élu député et nommé ministre de la Défense nationale, le ministre Sajjan a été impliqué dans la manipulation d'un contrat d'approvisionnement avec le chantier Davy au Québec. Ce scandale du cabinet a entraîné des menaces, des poursuites judiciaires, des enquêtes et la désignation d'un bouc émissaire, l'amiral Mark Norman. Ce dernier a ensuite été suspendu par le ministre Sajjan et le général Vance. On his first action as minister regarding an overseas Canadian Armed Forces operation, Minister Sajjan misled the House of Commons when he suggested that none of Canada's allies objected to the decision of the new Liberal government to pull Canada's CF-18 fighter aircraft from the international coalition fighting ISIS. This claim was shown to be false months later. On his first trip overseas to India as minister, in a speech to a business and political audience, Minister Sajjan made a false claim about his own military service in Operation Medusa during the war in Afghanistan. This falsehood caused a domestic and international embarrassment for which he later apologized. The minister cut health care benefits for military members. The minister removed service pay from soldiers deployed overseas. The minister embarrassed our country when he bought used aircraft from Australia for use by our men and women and made up a story about a capability gap as an excuse to do so. And of course, 3 years ago, Minister Sajjan failed a woman serving her country when he refused to act on a complaint of sexual misconduct against the Chief of Defence Staff at a time when the Canadian Armed Forces was leading Operation Honour to root out such conduct and to change the culture in our military. A cover-up of this incident ensued, and that has eroded any shred of respectability the minister may still have had with Canadians and those who serve our country. Minister Sajjan has failed Canadian women serving their country. He has sullied the reputation of the Canadian Armed Forces. Yet he prefers to put political talking points ahead of the needs of our country and its people. Today, Parliament will censure this minister and condemn his failed and corrupt leadership. For months, we have been learning about the Liberal cover-up of sexual misconduct allegations in the military. Le ministre Sajjan a menti aux Canadiennes qui servent leur pays. Il a sali la réputation des forces armées canadiennes. Maintenant, il veut faire des gains politiques plutôt que de répondre aux besoins de notre pays et de sa population. Aujourd'hui, le Parlement va blâmer ce ministre et condamner son leadership corrompu et parsemé d'échecs. Depuis des mois, nous en savons davantage sur le camouflage par les libéraux des allégations d'inconduite sexuelle dans les forces armées. This week, Conservatives called on Justin Trudeau to fire his Minister of Defence, Harjit Sajjan. He refused. Mr. Trudeau won't fire Minister Sajjan, and Minister Sajjan won't do the honourable thing and resign. Cette semaine, les conservateurs ont demandé à Justin Trudeau de congédier immédiatement son ministre de la Défense, Harjit Sajjan. Il a refusé, comme d'habitude. M. Trudeau ne veut pas congédier le ministre Sajjan, et le ministre Sajjan ne va pas démissionner. L'histoire continue. Canadians deserve better than the scandals, corruption, and continual cover-ups that have taken root in Trudeau Liberal Ottawa. Minister Sajjan misled Canadians about his service. He mismanaged ships and jet fleet contracts, and he covered up sexual misconduct allegations for 3 years. That is not the record of a minister who can be trusted to implement the changes necessary to eliminate sexual misconduct in our military and change the culture. Now that the corrupt Trudeau government has made it clear that they don't care about eliminating the issue of sexual misconduct in the military, the decision to fire Minister Sajjan will ultimately be made by voters in the next election. I, along with the rest of Canada's Conservatives, will continue to stand up for the brave women in the Canadian Armed Forces who deserve much better. Today, Conservatives will be asking the House of Commons to formally censure Minister Sajjan, who has lost the respect of members of the Canadian Armed Forces and lost the moral authority needed to implement the changes Canadians want to see in our military, to eliminate sexual misconduct and to make the culture more open. Aujourd'hui, les conservateurs vont demander à la Chambre de censurer officiellement le ministre Sajjan. Celui-ci a clairement perdu le respect des membres des Forces armées canadiennes. Il a perdu l'autorité morale pour mettre en œuvre les changements nécessaires pour éliminer l'inconduite sexuelle dans nos forces armées. More scandals, more corruption, more cover-ups. That is what Canadians can expect from Mr. Trudeau and his Liberal government. There is only one choice: to end the cycle of corruption and to secure accountability in Ottawa. That is Canada's Conservative Party. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
And we'll now be taking questions, starting with question on the phone and alternate between the room and the phone. Quick reminder, as usual, one question and one follow-up. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions, commençant par les questions au téléphone et alternant les questions de la salle et au téléphone. Petit rappel, une question avec une question de suivi. Operator, do we have the first question?
Your first question comes from Kevin Gallagher with CTV National News. Kevin, please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Thanks for taking our questions. I just want to know, what would this mean if you were to formally censure the Defence Minister, and do you think you have support from the Bloc and the NDP?
This is an unprecedented move, Kevin. The censure by the House of Commons is our ability to say that we condemn the corrupt and failed leadership of a minister who has lied repeatedly, who has been involved in cabinet scandals, scapegoating of a Canadian like Mark Norman, and has covered up sexual misconduct. It's a way for Parliament to express our condemnation of his failed leadership. It's a rarely used procedure, but because the minister won't show accountability, the Prime Minister never holds his own government or himself accountable. This is a way we can show that Canadians demand better, and we need to show women who want to serve their country that they can do so free from harassment and with the respect of their country.
Follow-up?
Yeah, I just want to know, have you spoken with the other opposition parties? Do you think you actually have the votes to formally censure the Defence Minister?
I know that all parliamentarians want to see an end to a culture that seems to turn the other way when it comes to investigating harassment allegations or sexual misconduct allegations. Previously, the NDP and Bloc have expressed concern about so many cases and so many victims coming forward. We have no Chief of Defence Staff. We've had a half dozen or more generals leave. They're playing golf because there's no leadership at the top. And there's a sense that this isn't being taken seriously by the Canadian Armed Forces. So I think the Bloc Québécois and the NDP have both expressed concern. I'm also hoping some Liberal MPs who want to send a signal of respect for women who don the uniform of service of our country would vote to censure the minister. This is what we can do to show that parliamentarians think a cover-up with respect to sexual misconduct, think the erosion of trust in the military is unacceptable. So I sincerely hope that Parliament can send this clear message.
We will take the next question from the floor. Nous allons prendre la prochaine question de la salle.
Hi there, Mr. O'Toole. Travis Danrad, CBC News. I'm just wondering if I can get your reaction to Annamie Paul's claims, her allegations that she has faced racism and sexism within her own party, and also the fact that she is saying that the Liberals here are partially to blame for this, and for that Prime Minister Trudeau is no ally of feminists.
Thank you, Travis, and welcome to the Hill. I have great respect for Ms. Paul. My interactions with her have been very engaging. I find her very intelligent, a very effective advocate. We certainly have some differences. So I can't speak to what she's faced. What I can say is this. Mr. Trudeau lets down everyone he makes promises to. We saw that with Ms. Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould leaving his leadership alongside other MPs. He's got no credibility as a self-proclaimed feminist because we've seen a 3-year cover-up run by his office of sexual harassment allegations in the Canadian Armed Forces. The minister himself, and I'm demanding accountability from him today, his chief of staff, I find it shocking the Prime Minister didn't know of these allegations when he renewed the contract of General Vance and gave him a bonus. This is unacceptable. And so, like everyone, people are disappointed that what Mr. Trudeau says and promises is never how he conducts himself. And there's a culture of entitlement and corruption in Trudeau, Ottawa that needs to be addressed. And that's what the Conservatives will do whenever the next election comes.
Thank you for that. Both Michelle Rempel-Garner and Tim Uppal apologized for their role in fanning the flames of Islamophobia in the last federal election. With some time to reflect on the events of the last week, including being booed at a vigil, will you apologize for the Conservative Party campaigning on a snitch line for barbaric practices? And what will your party do to gain the support of the Muslim community and voters heading into a potential election?
Well, first off, as I said to the Muslim community in London, we all must work together, all levels of government, faith organizations, nonprofits, to fight Islamophobia, to fight the alarming rise in intolerance and hate we've seen, particularly in the pandemic, and they have my full commitment to do that. They also know, and we spoke about this, my longstanding commitment to fight against Islamophobia and to actually bring parties together on this. I've tried consistently to reach out across the aisle to make sure that all Canadians know that we will fight issues affecting their community, particularly with respect to intolerance. And I think this process of politicians from all stripes, including my own party, reaching out and restoring trust and faith with Canadians as we plan a roadmap together to secure a future after the pandemic. I encourage that. I'm a leader that will hold myself to account, that wants to build the Conservative Party to reflect the hopes, fears, and aspirations of Canada in 2021. I've done that from my first speech as leader, and I'll do that every day to make sure people feel welcome in the Conservative Party of Canada.
Operator, next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Your next question comes from Stephanie Levitz with Toronto Star. Stephanie, please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Just picking up on that, though, if you're going to hold yourself to account, why won't you hold yourself to account for being part of a party that was campaigning on something the Muslim community found deeply offensive in past elections?
Well, Stephanie, if you're referring to M103, for example, people that have followed that issue know that I reached out to the Liberal MP to try and address the real concerns with respect to Islamophobia and remove some of the politics from the process. I think all parties have allowed for politics to get in the way of standing up for a community, my own included. But I certainly have a track record of trying to work out and build bridges. From my first speech as leader, when I reached out to all faiths, all Canadians of all backgrounds, right through to my meeting ahead of that heartbreaking vigil in London, I'm looking to build trust, to build partnerships, and to secure a future for all Canadians. And in the process, if I have to work hard to restore some trust, I'm committed to doing that.
And just as a follow-up, just pivoting back to the Greens, there have been a number of folks within your party or connected to your party who've, spoken up on behalf of Annamie Paul, spoken against what she says she's facing in the party, and also suggested that your party should work harder to talk to Green voters who might be disillusioned with what's going on with Annamie Paul. So I wonder if you think that there's room for you there. And if I could also just get your thoughts on the floor crossing of Ms. Atwin as well, and what your assessment is of the significance of that.
As I've said, I've really enjoyed my interactions with Ms. Paul. In fact, we spent some time after the vigil in London speaking. She's engaging, incredibly intelligent, and I think passionate. I am a Green Conservative. I'm very proud of the policy we announced several months ago that puts a price on carbon, but that has a really focused approach on creating jobs and GDP growth. There are Conservatives that are green-minded. We joked about so-called Tories on bikes that might have voted green in the past. I want to build in my movement, in our Conservative Party of 2021, people that are concerned about the future, the incredible debt, the inflation, the housing crisis, and climate change, Indigenous reconciliation. If you want a real plan of action and not just fancy words and promises with no plan and hashtags Mr. Trudeau's hollow leadership, the Conservative Party is an option I'd like more Canadians to take a look at, including people that may have voted green and may be disappointed by the division and in the case of Miss Atwin, some of the divisive language she's used in the past that I think people want to see better. So if people want better, please take a look at the Conservative Party of Canada.
Opérateur, prochaine question. Operator, next question.
No questions on the phone line.
I've answered all questions. Well, thank you very much.
Well-
Have a great day.